Hello, good evening. Welcome, everybody, to Wednesday Night Live from Courtroom Confidential, the fastest growing true crime news channel on YouTube. This is going to be a very good show. I'm excited about this. We've got some breaking news for you. We've got the source of the breaking news for you. And we're going to be talking about the Bryan Kohberger case. And of course, because that is the only news that was made today in the world of true crime. If you follow true crime closely, you know that this was a very slow news day, and that the only thing happening was this recent news on Bryan Kohberger. So hello, everybody who's here. Kathy and Afton are mods, and Sonia, I see you as well. And Jury Duty Pod, Kimberly, and who else? Susan D, and everybody who's in the chat. Thank you also so much for being here. Thank you for joining us on a Wednesday night. We are going to jump into the Bryan Kohberger case, of course, and we have a very special guest. It is one of your favorites. It is Kevin Fixler. Alicia K. Mayo is here to get her Fixler fix. Kevin Fixler from the Idaho Statesman is a good friend of our show, and he broke an article yesterday that has kind of lit the Kohberger world on fire as far as a new, I don't want to say new witness, but a new witness, publicly discovered witness, I guess is the best way of putting it. Not necessarily entirely new to the investigation, but new to everyone who's been following this case. And I think it's a very important witness. They're going to be a pivotal witness in this case. So we're going to talk to him about that. But as always on Wednesdays, we run a poll. So while we're talking to Kevin, in the background, we will be running a poll for one. We can talk about Karen Reed. I hear it was a slow news day in Karen Reed world. So if you want to talk about that, we can talk about that. Rex Heuermann had a hearing today where there was a challenge. Thank you so much, Annalie Finch, for kicking us off. I appreciate the super sticker. Rex Heuermann had a challenge in court to the DNA again, and it's actually an interesting challenge. It's a challenge about the software used and whether or not that is prone to glitches and requirements of updates. We could talk about what effect, if any, that could have on the case. And then finally, a case that you may not have heard of, a case about a man by the name of Michael Colucci, who is accused of murdering his wife. And the defense is that she committed suicide. And I will explain to you the circumstances of all of that. She was found with a garden hose wrapped around her neck. And there were indications of her mental unrest, I guess I should put it. And the judge actually quashed the murder indictment today. So we could get into the nuances of that case that might be new to all of you. So Karen Reed, if you've heard of her, Rex Heuermann and Michael Colucci are the ones that are in our poll. But I am super juiced, and I hope that all of you are as well, to welcome our next guest, Kevin Fixler. Before I do that, we do have a big announcement. We're doing a giveaway. Stay to the end. We've reached 35,000 subscribers, so we want to do a giveaway to thank all of you for that. We'll be talking about the details, so stay to the end for that. And please hit those like buttons as I introduce our guest. Hello, my friend. How are you?
Doing pretty well. I'm glad the court hearing today in Boise was fairly short and direct, and it's been some long days though. I think we were talking off air, and yeah, it's been a week.
Yeah,
and it's only Wednesday.
I bet it has. It's only Wednesday, and the trial hasn't even begun. Have you thought about how you're going to maintain your own mental and physical health when this trial is actually going?
Well, I know we'll get to what Judge Hippler discussed today during the hearing, but it's becoming very real. Obviously, we're 6 weeks out from jury selection, and around the newsroom, we certainly started to brace ourselves and understand, all right, we better get our last days of vacation in and understand that 14-hour day work during the work week, that's soon ahead.
Has anybody talked about 6 weeks on whether or not they feel that that's a realistic estimate? Like if it could take longer or shorter? I feel like we just watched 4 weeks of the Karen Reed trial, which to me is not nearly as complicated as this trial will be. Unless they just move with incredible alacrity in this case, I feel like it could even take longer than 6 weeks.
No, so I was saying that we're 6 weeks out from jury
Oh,
selection.
I'm sorry. What is that's how fried my brain is. What is the
That,
estimate on the trial? Do we know?
yeah, 15.
Oh, well, there you go. That's
Yeah,
why that's why
and that
6 weeks didn't sound right to me. 15 sounds about right.
yeah, and that would include sentencing were there to be a conviction. I think they anticipate about 3 weeks of mitigation aggravation if they are reviewing a sentence of death.
Gotcha. In the penalty phase, for everybody who's watching and not aware of that, in any case where they're seeking the death penalty, they bifurcate the trial. So you would have the guilt phase that would last for several weeks. If they come back with a guilty verdict and finding that he is eligible for the death penalty, then they go into a new trial, as it were, which is the penalty phase, where they put on entirely different types of witnesses and then come back to the jurors again for a verdict on whether or not do they feel he is deserving of the greatest penalty that we have in this country or not. And that itself, you're saying, could take 3 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, so we're looking at 12 weeks of a trial, and then the penalty phase as you've described it.
Wow, incredible. All right, I don't want to delay any further because I am very honored and tickled and appreciative that you've come on, because you broke some news. You are the source of this news, this brand new breaking news. I want to tell us about how that happened. And then this is the first interview you've done regarding this breaking news. So thank you so much for honoring us all by coming on here to talk about it. But talk to us about, it's not a new witness in the sense that newly discovered by law enforcement, but it's certainly new to the world of people following this case. Tell us what this is all about.
Yeah, anybody who's following this case, I mean, even dating to Bryan Kohberger's arrest in late December of 2022, knows the history that interestingly, right, that a DoorDash delivery of food was made to 1122 King Road. And it was to Xana Kernodle, one of the 4 victims. And it's almost incomprehensible to understand that we knew roughly about 4 a.m. that this bag of food was dropped off, and police estimated that the 4 victims were stabbed to death between 4 and 4:25 a.m. So it raised this question for the longest time that we've all sought to answer, and that is, did the person who dropped off the food see anything?
Yeah.
And we've never known who the individual is. They've never been identified by police publicly. They spoke to the individual very, very early in, and we've wanted to know for the longest time. So you asked, how did I stumble across this information? I am, while the first journalist to publish this information, I happened to see, and I also follow the true crime blogs and the Facebook page that has internet fame with regards to this case. And I started to see some inklings of this. So, publishing on social media is a lot different than publishing in traditional media in terms of fact checking and the rigor that is applied. That doesn't make me particularly special, but it just takes a different threshold, I think, than just popping off and throwing something online. And that's not to discredit anybody. I hope everyone on social media who is following this case and who has a true crime background and considers himself an investigator of some kind, I hope they're applying that level of rigor when they're putting information out into the world. But I happened to spot that on one of these posts, and so I started to dig into it, and I followed the thread, and I found the video I think you're going to show of this DoorDash driver who self-identifies to law enforcement during a traffic stop last September. But beyond that, I started to fact check who this person was. We knew the initials of this individual because of a recent defense court filing. And I just kept pulling and getting to the bottom of it. I filed for public records requests between 3 different agencies. I wanted to understand if the other things that she said to police were accurate. And it's at that point you start to get to a threshold with your editor who's also fact checking you to understand that we have enough to move on this. And if we didn't, we wouldn't have published it. And I've seen, to be honest with you, attacks on social media that I'm a shill for publishing this, or, I have no integrity. And I take those things to heart because I really believe in the job we do as journalists. And, no good deed goes unpunished. And right. I've got thick skin. I've been doing this a long time. It doesn't bother me, but I just want people to understand this is not something we just spit out. This
Right.
took a lot of hard work. And if I didn't believe it to be true to the best of my ability to verify it, we would have never published.
It's so funny that you say that's the reaction to some people, because as you were describing it, I was thinking, wow, how much work goes into this stuff, and how admirable it is that you didn't just run with it immediately, because it sounds like, when you hit upon this kind of information, I can imagine the antsiness that you have to, let's just get it out there. Like, I want to be the first one to tell people about this. This is important news. This is something that I feel our audience and followers and readers and subscribers will care a lot about, but that you have to be patient and you have to do the work and the groundwork, and you've got editors and everyone else looking over your shoulder. So I applaud you. Maybe you're being criticized, but not here and not by us. I applaud you for the work that you put into it. And because of that, it is the right way and it is reliable. And I have seen that story picked up across the country. Everybody's running with this right now about this new information coming out. So I want to play the video, and then you made an excellent point that I was thinking about, is that this shouldn't really be a shock, because you would think if you're the investigator, one of the first people you would do is try to find this DoorDash person, right? Like the way in which you found the DoorDash person, and we're going to hear the video, it does sound like she knows she's already been contacted by police. So in my view, this is not someone, and correct me if you think I'm viewing this the wrong way, but in my view, this is someone who police have probably already reached out to, having discovered her otherwise. And this was just kind of a tip that you were able to unwind to find out who this person was on this video. Do you follow me so far?
I do. And what I'll say is that the probable cause affidavit that was released in the days after Kohberger's arrest, it actually wasn't until he arrived until he arrived to Idaho. He was flown from the East Coast after his arrest, but it wasn't until then that the probable cause affidavit was released. And it did identify the DoorDash information, and it said that police had been in touch with them. We didn't know their gender. And I had heard long ago that it was a woman, but it was just not something I could verify. So I didn't run with it. But we verified this thing 4 or 5 different ways. I am 100% certain to the ability that I can that she is the DoorDash driver. And the information she reveals is particularly interesting, because we didn't know anything that she might have seen or what she would potentially testify to at trial.
Wow. Okay. So let's play this video, and then we'll talk a little bit about what it might be that she's testifying to at trial.
And then now I have to testify. So yeah, because I'm a DoorDash driver, so yeah.
You have to testify in which murder case?
Murder case with the college girl.
Oh.
I'm a DoorDash driver, I saw Bryan.
Okay. The audio is not the greatest on that. She looks upset. I'm not going to say she looks like she might otherwise be intoxicated or something. I'm not going to get into any of that, but it's difficult to understand what she's saying. But some of what we know that she is saying is something about, now I have to testify in the big murder case too. She's kind of upset with the idea that she was pulled over for expired tags by Pullman police. So she's under investigation for something else entirely. And this is way after the fact. And she's now saying that she's kind of upset with her life. And on top of that, now I have to testify at this big murder case. And the police goes, "What are you talking about?" And then she references the college kids. And then she says, "I'm the DoorDash driver. And I believe she says, "I saw Bryan," and then it kind of trails off. And then she says, "I parked right next to him." Is that your understanding of kind of what she's saying in this video here?
Yeah. And I got an email from somebody who said, "You need to retract your story. The audio is terrible. You cannot infer that is what she said." And yet I actually personally, I don't mind sharing this because it's a team effort. I didn't hear that she was saying that I parked right next to him. And it was actually an editor of mine who was fact checking this, who said, "I think she says I parked right next to him." So that is what we hear in that video. People want to go after this woman on what she may testify at trial, but I can tell you definitively that she was the DoorDash driver. And if she gets on the stand, she may face some tough cross-examination, as is the right of the defense. And what she saw is in question to some extent. It leaves the question open-ended. Does it mean that she saw a white Hyundai Elantra in the neighborhood?
Right.
I don't know. She's not saying that she saw Bryan Kohberger peeking into the window, where I've heard people try to claim that too. She's just saying, I saw Bryan. I parked right next to him. And it is clear, even though the audio is not good, it is clear she says that.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I've listened to it too, and I hear that distinctly. So if that's wrong, we're both wrong. And if anybody hears differently, I'm sure that's up for interpretation. And end of the day, doesn't really matter, because this isn't what's going to be submitted at trial. What's going to be submitted at trial is her actual testimony, which could be close to this or different from this. We don't know. But an interesting point that you make is it doesn't sound like, and we shouldn't assume that she even realized what she was really witnessing at the time that she's making this DoorDash delivery. This could have been just any old DoorDash delivery to this person. And she gets a DoorDash, the only significance to it to her might be that it's late at night, right? It's not, it's a very late call that she's getting. I mean, it's at, almost 4:00 in the morning that she's making a Jack in the Box delivery. So maybe that would stick out in her mind. But other than that, we can assume that maybe she didn't even realize. She parks next to a car. Maybe she takes notice of the color of the car or what kind of car it is. Maybe she takes notice of somebody else there. Maybe not. But I think what happens is that police realize a DoorDash was made. They can easily find out who's the delivery person on that, because DoorDash keeps records of all of that. And they reach out to her and probably made it aware to her after the fact that she's this important witness. No?
Yeah, I mean, all the points you're making stack up. I've actually, maybe I'm embarrassed to say I've never ordered through DoorDash, but I believe it's the same as getting an Amazon package, and that the delivery driver, if they're not handing it directly to you, which is another question, right? Did she hand the bag directly to Xana Kernodle? That would be very interesting information to know. We don't have that. Or did she just leave the bag at one of the doors? Was it the front door where the driveway is? Was it at the slider? I don't know. These are the questions that we would want to have answers to. But I believe, to get to the point about the Amazon package, I believe they take a photo of it. And so there is a timestamp photo that exists somewhere, most likely, that pins it at 3:59 a.m. And according to prosecutors, based on any number of surveillance videos from the neighborhood, we know that a white vehicle that police say was a white Hyundai Elantra was moving around that neighborhood at that same period of time. It parks finally at 4:07. So there's an 8-minute gap there to understand. But just because she took the photo at 3:59, it raises the question, well, how quickly was she able to walk from the property to her car? And was she looking to see where the next delivery was going? Did the car then come into the neighborhood? These are how your mind starts to generate ideas. And we want to know. We don't know the answers to that right now. But that's what putting her on the stand and under oath and understanding how important this person could be to the case is. I mean, I want to know. We all do.
Yeah. No, you're making excellent points too. It could be, first of all, let me thank a homicide detective's daughter so much for becoming a member. Appreciate that. It could be as little as she just helps out with the timeline. She's going to establish that, yes, I was there. Yes, I dropped off this package. I got back into my vehicle. And that's it. I mean, it could be that simple. That's the only thing that she adds to the case. Or it could be as much as, I was there. I was sitting in my car, playing on my phone, waiting for the next order to come through. And I noticed this white Honda Elantra pull up, and I saw a gentleman get out of it. I mean, it could be that crazy. I mean, we can't assume that she's going to make any kind of positive identifications of either a suspect or the vehicle, but it does seem as though she is there about as close in time to when we believe the suspect was there, and she's the only person not inside of that house that's going to be able to testify to that.
Right. And the point you're making, we already know that she helps with the timeline because we understand that Xana was still awake and alive at 3:59. We know that the bag of food was inside. And we also know through, again, related to the probable cause affidavit, that Xana was on TikTok until I believe 4:12. So we know these details. She already helped police with the timeline. What more she might be able to offer, we don't know yet, but we can see from this video that she at least claims that she saw something, and that would be pretty relevant to trial.
Yeah. And I'll tell you this too, and I wanted to thank Jen St. Pierre for the gift of a membership. Appreciate you. Appreciate everybody for being here. This is how really good prosecutors operate. Little details create this tapestry of information. And maybe this person is not some sort of, it's not going to be some bombshell, breathtaking moment in court, but every little detail you can add along the way that corroborates your timeline, that gives a fuller understanding to the minutes leading up to and including and after that the murders took place, is all helpful to the jurors. So this woman may be just a small piece in all of that, and it may not be all that tremendously significant as far as proving guilt, but it's significant as far as establishing what took place that evening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, you have it exactly right. You know better than I.
Okay. I appreciate that. Keep those coming. I'm going to play the video one more time because I know it was hard for everybody to hear. And then I want to talk a little bit. We'll take some questions, but then I want to talk a little bit about what took place in court today, because that's important too. What am I doing wrong here, Kaylin? Oh, she says, leave her alone and let her work her magic. Okay.
And then now I have to testify. Big part of me is here, so yeah, because I'm a DoorDash driver, so yeah.
You have to testify in which murder case?
Murder case with the college girl.
Oh.
I'm a DoorDash driver, I saw Bryan.
I parked right next to him. You can hear it.
Yeah. No, it's very clear to me. It's very clear. But again, this is not a person under oath right now. We don't even know if what she's saying to this officer is true, right? All we do know is that we can corroborate she's in fact that person that has been referenced in prior affidavits. She is in fact the DoorDash driver, but whether or not she saw anything, helps out in any of that, parked right next to him, as she says, is still, I think, smart for us to say, let's leave that to be determined at trial.
And yet, I will share with you, and this is not something in my story, a source has confirmed for me that she is on the witness list for the prosecution. So what does that tell us? Yeah. They certainly believe that she's relevant.
100%. That she is the person. She is that person, and whatever information she has is valuable enough for them to call her. And I think they will call her. I mean, she, when you have a case that doesn't involve video footage of the crime taking place, you want to give jurors as much as you possibly can. And that can include just even stuff like this. As innocuous as it might be, it's helpful in creating an understanding of what took place that evening. One thing I just noticed about this, and I've watched this a few times, I didn't notice it till now. This camera is positioned like on the police officer's head. Did you notice that? Like, we're looking at her eyeglasses, it looks like, and the camera's to the right of her. I've never seen that before.
We're used to the typical body cam footage and the placement maybe on the chest or, somewhere around there. But when there was this traffic stop, this woman was arrested for, an unrelated issue, and you can see that door over the left side there. She was in that retention cell for a period. And yes, when she walks to go grab her, you can see that the camera is on her glasses, and she explains, just so you know, you're being live recorded.
So funny. I've never seen that before. You never know when you're going to be on camera, folks, is the moral of the story here. All right, let's get to what happened in court today, though, and thank you, Farm Girl, for the gifting the membership. Appreciate that. Because this was a significant day. They were talking about, one, they wanted to consider this issue based a motion to continue. The defense is again asking for more time, in large part based upon the Dateline revelations that came out. And then there was some stuff that was done behind closed doors that you were not able to attend. You attended this hearing today, but we kind of have some insights as to what may have been discussed and what may have been done about that. So tell us first, and thank you, Christy Royer, for becoming a member. Appreciate you. What happened with this motion to continue? It wasn't long, but what were the arguments and what ended up happening?
Yeah, it was about a 30-minute hearing, the public portion anyway. And so, as you pointed out, this was the defense's latest effort to delay the trial. They have argued in filings not only that they face highly prejudicial information about their client, including through considerable media coverage that continues. The publicity is harming their ability to get a fair and impartial jury. It's exactly why they asked that the trial be moved down from Moscow to Boise, 6 hours south. And they feel like that's being jeopardized by continued publicity of the case. And they noted not only the Dateline episode where Judge Hippler had previously said there were likely gag order violations based on potential leaks, including from either law enforcement or the prosecution side. But also there's this forthcoming Amazon Prime 4-part docuseries, which is a companion component to the forthcoming James Patterson book on the case, which releases July 14th. And that's in the build up to the trial. Of course, that's why they would peg that date. But the docuseries releases on July 11th. And apparently, and I've seen some snippets and some different teasers and such, but Ann Taylor highlighted today, Bryan Kohberger's lead attorney, that the docuseries and the book promise inside sources. And so she's making the presumption that these are additional leaks, gag order violations. It has the possibility of being so. And so that will further prejudice a jury and hurt her client's ability. But not only that, she has continued to point to the 68 terabytes of evidence that she obtained through discovery, and that they haven't even gotten to. So there's so much information, this glut of information that they have yet to review, and you can't know what you can't know, right? And so they're saying that this is setting them up to be ineffective counsel, and that it violates Bryan Kohberger's rights from a number of constitutional amendments and requirements, and pleaded her case to Judge Hippler today. I would say he was quieter than he has been. You can see on the upper right there, he put his head in his hand and really just listened, except for to interject at one point to correct her that the average capital case, she said the average capital case averages 3.5 years to complete. And he said, yeah, but that's in federal court where it operates at a snail's pace at its best day. So
Good for
he
him.
challenged her
Good
back.
for him.
Yeah, he challenged her back. We heard from Josh Hurwitz, the latest addition to the prosecution. He's the former U.S. attorney for Idaho, who had been appointed by former President Biden. He has now transitioned to work for Bill Thompson in this case. And we heard his voice for the first time and make arguments that this is not an appropriate thing to do. We cannot get into a place of a perpetual continuance, is how he put it. And he also said that the media coverage, while a challenge for seating a jury, that's what the voir dire process is for. And we can't live on the whims of the media, is basically what he said, because there's going to be more and more, and that cannot define when we choose to have a trial.
Excellent points. Excellent points. Does she, Ann Taylor, I'm referencing, does she, when she asks for more time, does she ever give an indication to the judge of what that means? Like, is she ever saying, I need X amount of days and then I'll be ready? Or is it just this idea, I need more time, there's terabytes of information that we can't get ready, you're forcing us to trial?
Great point. In fact, Josh Hurwitz raised that today. He said not only are they asking for a delay kind of in the last moments, which came as a surprise to the prosecution, but also they haven't even laid out how much time they think they need. And so I think that really it emphasized the point to Judge Hippler. They don't even know how much time they think they need. And as a result, Judge Hippler, he said that he would issue a written order in short order, is how he said it. Hippler, when he does that, we tend to see that within 1 or 2 days. So I would expect tomorrow's a federal holiday. I think he'll probably take a beat, and maybe we'll see this Friday if it doesn't drop. Perhaps it dropped right now. I'm on here with you, so I don't know. But I expect it will come quickly. And what he told them was everyone needs to prepare as if the trial will happen on the current schedule, which is jury selection starting on July 30th and in earnest trial happening on August 11th. So he said, until further notice, you need to continue working toward that. That is likely where I am headed, but he reserved the right to write an opinion once he comes to his final decision.
Yeah, which is code word for unless I change my own mind. I've made up my mind. Prepare yourself. So unless I change my own mind, that's what's happening. I will say that just in my experience as a defense attorney, it is always good practice to give the court a timeline. In other words, you go in and you go, Your Honor, I need 60 days. You give me 60 days, I can have this done. And then when you come back in 60 days, you go, Your Honor, I need another 30 days, 30 more days, and I can get this done. And maybe that's the way that you buy yourself time. But this idea of an indefinite, I don't know, I have no idea, we have barely scratched the surface sort of thing, judges are just going to roll their eyes and go, well, what you're telling me is that you're never going to be ready. And therefore, it's kind of a meaningless request that you're making. So let's just go ahead and get this show on the road. How much did she get into the media stuff? Because it sounds like her requests are more just about the size of the case, which has not changed since this Dateline episode. It's almost like she's just using the Dateline episode as a excuse to bring back this old refrain of this case is too big for you to rush me along.
Again, the prosecutor, Josh Hurwitz, actually pointed that out, that this seems to be a response to the most recent attempt to dump the death penalty. This is now their answer. She did lean heavily into the media component. I mentioned the Patterson book, and this is the first time we've heard in court the Amazon docuseries, but we only kind of just learned about that in the last week or so. So she referenced that too. I think a lot of this does have to do with the amount of information they have not gotten to. She did point out, like, look, this is setting us up to be ineffective counsel, which is obviously an appealable issue, but maybe they're even trying to work toward that we'll give it our best shot. Of course, we're duty bound to do so. And yet if we ourselves think that we did an ineffective job, this sets up Kohberger, assuming a conviction, which we can't really assume at this point, but were a conviction to occur, that sets him up to say, well, my counsel wasn't effective. The trial happened too quickly.
Yeah, that's what it smells like to me, is that this is all laying the groundwork so that when they do appeal, if there is a conviction and one of their appeals is ineffective assistance of counsel, ineffective assistance of counsel doesn't necessarily mean your attorney did a bad job. It could mean your attorney could not have done a better job given the circumstances that were out of their control, i.e., they weren't given enough time to be effective. And so this is laying the groundwork. Every time they bring this up in court is another opportunity for the appellate attorneys to highlight the judge was made aware of this and still bulldozed through their requests. Afton says she may or may not have been more specific in documents provided to the court prosecutors didn't get to see. What about that? That's true.
The many of these actually the continuance documents were not sealed, so we did see much of that, but I think we're going to still get to the closed hearing portion about alternate perpetrators, and that stuff was sealed. So we don't have any idea what was included in that. I will note, by the way, I mean, you said, does she lean into the media component or how much of this is about, again, the 68 terabytes of data? She did bring up the fact that she collected new discovery documents from the state, but Hurwitz had an answer to that too. And he said, actually, what that is that's our interviews with your mitigation witnesses. So we're giving you the responses to new information, and we're using our time to set ourselves up for, if there was a conviction, to cross-examine your witnesses. And here's what they said they would testify to our questions. So I don't know that I will say, I find Ann Taylor to be a very capable attorney.
Yeah.
I think she's given it her all. And I've heard that from people I've interviewed about her, former colleagues, things like that. And she stood up, and she, from notes that she had on the podium with her, I mean, she made a compelling case except the other side gets a chance. And you already knew that Judge Hippler would be skeptical of this. He already dismissed a prior argument from Ann Taylor that was setting this continuance motion up, where she said, we're getting to the point where we've run into some challenges and we're starting to think we don't have enough time for this. And he said, in so many words, give me a break.
Yeah. Yeah. You can tell by those comments, he's done. There's nothing has changed his view on this. And I agree with you. I think she's very capable. I think she is not shy, and she will make arguments, and they are usually well thought out arguments. They're just, unfortunately for her, not successful arguments. But, those comments, this is his quote. I want to read it directly to everybody. I fully encourage everyone to go ahead as if trial is going to take place. That's code word for I'm not changing anything when it is scheduled for. I reserve the right to write the decision I come to, but as of now, I would tell you it's likely we're going to trial on the date indicated. That is, unless I wake up for some reason and decide I want to take a break, we're heading to trial. So I don't think that has changed anything. I want to ask you, this is kind of a comment, but feel free to weigh in on this. There is a difference between, I think it's unfair to put all of the coverage on this case under the umbrella of media, because there's journalists like yourself that I think are doing real tremendous work and really following this and doing the investigative stuff. And then there does seem to be this kind of, I think they call it infotainment sort of aspect to all of this. Like, it's funny to me that there's this coordinated PR sort of release with a Amazon Prime docuseries along with a book, all perfectly timed to be right before the trial. Again, I don't want you to have to throw any of your cohorts or any, colleagues under the bus or anything, but doesn't that seem to be more of the issue? We're not just talking about, hey, the newspapers are covering this a whole bunch. We're talking about these kind of, I don't know. I don't want to go as far as saying exploitative, but just really highly orchestrated coverage of this.
Let me just ask a clarifying question. Are you asking about other people who are opining or writing or shooting documentaries about this? Or do you mean kind of the social media world? Because this is the biggest case in the country. I know we came on and we joked about, hey, there's a Karen Reed ruling or verdict, and I don't know anything about the case. I don't mind sharing that. I don't follow true crime in other states. I know it's the national case outside of this one, right? But yeah, I mean, this is a massive case, and there's so many people who are commenting and interested and following. I mean, you just got to go to Twitter and search Idaho 4 or Bryan Kohberger. It's everywhere. But who are you referring to specifically?
Well, I guess I was just making more of a commentary on the idea that, the idea of like a Dateline or a 48 Hours putting together a docuseries on a currently big case is not all that outrageous. But I guess the idea of doing a book release coordinated along with the docuseries that's perfectly timed to be right before the trial takes place, there does seem to be, in recent years, and especially around this case, a far more kind of PR. It's almost like a movie release. It's being treated to me like this trial is almost like a movie release. My wife has a background in publicity, and I feel like I'm seeing echoes of that in the way that some of the surrounding quote unquote coverage of this has been treated. And I don't want to put you in a spot, but I'm just making an observation, and feel free to remain silent or comment on it.
I've shared this with others, but the Patterson book is the third from a publishing house. And actually, if you go on Amazon, people should look at this. There are umpteen books about this case. The three, however, that come from a publishing house, there's Patterson's book. Before that was one from Howard Bloom. And before that was from an Idaho author, J. Reuben Appelman. And I know J. Reuben and I know Howard. And it's almost a bad omen in this case thus far that these books have been released tied to trial dates that have been scheduled, because the first two didn't pan out. So here we are in a continuance hearing, and the question is, okay, we've got a book coming July 14th. Well, hey, it didn't work out for the original October 2023 trial date. And then we had another trial date up in Moscow before the case got moved, and that didn't work out for Howard Bloom's book either, tied the date. So it may work out for James Patterson.
Trina says, and thank you so much for the super chat. Did anyone see the Amazon documentary trailer? I feel like it seemed like it was coming from families who are angry or fed up, or is that just me? Thanks for the great live. I have not actually seen the trailer. Have you seen it?
I have, and they have the goods. They've got the two friends who came over and met with the two surviving roommates and were featured on the 911 call. Unfortunately, the college student, the man, had come across the bodies of Xana and his friend Ethan. We know we can hear that on the call. And so his girlfriend, the Chapin family was very involved in this. And it's the first time we're hearing from the other two triplets. That's their first interviews, and that's teased. Also, Jim and Stacy Chapin. We haven't seen a lot from Jim. Stacy has kind of been the, I hate to call her the spokesperson for the family, but that's kind of been the situation. And then we have the Laramies, which is Madison Mogen's mother and her stepfather. There's a little teaser in there that they're involved too. I will tell you, I texted with Steve Gonzalez related to the DoorDash driver because he had a private investigator who was looking into a lot of these details. He's really pushed to help solve this thing and assist law enforcement dating to the early days. And he vented some frustration over time, but has come around on that. But I asked him, I said, does it frustrate you that the source being cited in terms of what could delay the trial is actually other victims' families? And he surprised me a little bit with what he said, because his family does not want this trial delayed. They have been vocal about that. They want this thing to get going. They've waited 2.5 years and they are over delays. And he said, I can't fault a family for coming out at the time that makes them comfortable after all this time. And I will note that his family is tight with the Laramies. Their daughters were best friends since 6th grade, but I don't think he knows the Chapins particularly well. I don't think he knows the Kernodles. And he told me, that's what he said in text. I can't blame somebody for wanting to come out when it feels right for them. And so he doesn't think that this warrants a delay. That's obviously been the argument from the defense, but he doesn't think that that's something that should be a justification for a delay.
Wow. Yeah, that is wise words to kind of appreciate that. Let these people maybe have a moment to breathe and handle this the way that they want. T. Duclos, thank you so much. And she says, or he or she says, thank you, Josh and Kevin, and we appreciate that. Let's get into, though, the stuff that you weren't able to attend, but what we know or can imagine about it. The other thing that was going to be all argued today is the alternate perpetrator evidence. And my understanding is that in Idaho, in order to make these arguments in court, you have to do more than say, hey, this investigation was myopic. This investigation ignored things. There were other leads. They didn't follow them up. But you actually have to say, here's the other person that could be responsible for this. And not only do you have to identify a solid theory as to who that could be, but it also has to exonerate your client. In other words, it can't just be, well, this other person could have also been there. It has to be, this person was there, committed this crime to the exclusion of my client. What more do we know about what happened today on that? Do we have any indication on whether or not when the judge will rule on that?
We don't. And I mentioned earlier in the show that those filings have all been filed under seal. So that's done with the effect of ensuring that whoever the defense has named as the potential suspect that police didn't dig into deep enough is not defamed, is not outed publicly, and people chasing after them and pointing to them as the killer. And the defense could be right. Maybe, to your point, that law enforcement was too myopic. They didn't submit the other two male blood DNA to CODIS. And as a result, they chased Bryan Kohberger too closely based on investigative genetic genealogy and the single source of male DNA on the knife sheath at a stabbing crime. Perhaps that's all true, but as you noted, in Idaho, in order to say not only was it not my client, it was this person, you have to actually provide evidence. And Judge Hippler said at a prior hearing that we need to explore the admissibility of this information that you've provided. It's got to be more than just an allegation. And so the requirements, his order to file evidence that this alternate perpetrator or perpetrators, we don't know, it could be multiple. In fact, the defense has previously said that there's a lot of alternate perpetrator potential. But you have to actually show proof. And we don't know what that is. We do know that the state objected to that in their own court filings. But again, that was under seal. We took a 10-minute break after the public portion today with the discussion on the continuance, and they went into closed session to discuss whether or not the defense has met the threshold to argue at trial before jurors that not only was it not our client, it was this guy.
Yeah. I have well, I'm just totally speculating here, but I feel like if there was something more solid for the defense, we probably would have heard more whisperings of it before now. And it seems like they have been doing a little bit of a soft shoe, trying to avoid the issue. And the prosecution has been kind of pressuring them to get us this evidence if you're going to, in fact, argue it. But we'll find out. I mean, or we won't. Or it could just be the judge says denied, and we don't even know what their theory was, right? So which would probably be the better way to handle it, because like you said, we don't want to defame anyone if they are actually going to name someone.
Right. And I think another point to make is that the state has previously filed in court records that they got thousands of tips about individuals,
right,
about vehicles, about all these different things. And the only ones that were substantiated were those of Bryan Kohberger.
Yeah. How about this special prosecutor? Was that at all discussed today that we know of? The issue of he had invited the defense to request that. They have now made the request. What's being done with that? And this is, by the way, the special prosecutor related to an investigation of where the leaked evidence for the Dateline episode came from.
Yeah, it wasn't discussed during open session. It wasn't clear if it might be. Those filings we can see from the case log where all the filings are listed. They'll post to that, but not necessarily post the records unless they're public. They might issue an order that seals another record. We can see those, but we can actually see in the case summary, the log of all the filings, that the state was responding to the request for an investigation, a special investigation. Sealed records, but we can see that. I wrote a story a week ago that pointed to that apparently it looks like the defense followed up on Judge Hippler's request. And not only did they file for the continuance based on the alleged Dateline leaks, but also that they filed for the special prosecutor. There was no mention of whether or not that appointment occurred or what a timeline would look like or how that would work in parallel with the trial, which for now remains scheduled for August 11th. But we can assume that may have been discussed, and what we would see, I think, after the fact would be written orders that would come out and post to the case summary page, and then everybody will be chasing the same documents given the gag order.
One last thing I want to ask you about this, just kind of out of your comfort zone, but I want to get your thoughts. And then while you're giving us your thoughts on it, I'm going to try to see if we have any questions, if you don't mind sticking around for a couple more minutes. But also today, we learned that there is a private investigator by the name of Jason Jensen, who has a Facebook following, apparently, and has now organized in a few days, a 2-day over June 21st and 22nd, a 2-day community search for the murder weapon, and that they plan on covering a 35-mile wide area along the route from Moscow, Idaho to Pullman, Washington. Or maybe I should, that would probably be the direction we should consider. It's along routes of Highway 95 and then up north through Highway 195 for people familiar with the area. But this is essentially, I think they're trying to reconstruct what would have been the path taken from Moscow back to Pullman, looking for the knife. And we talked a little bit about this ahead of time, and you made some interesting points. So I'll kind of just cue you up for that, and then I'll see if we have any interesting questions left over.
I'll throw a wrench at you over the knife.
Yeah.
What we actually don't know is whether or not police actually found it. They may very well have. They may very well have, and that's not evidence that they would have had to have disclosed at this point. That's the type of thing that the defense would know about through discovery and the exhibit list, which remains sealed. But it is possible that police, after the fact, found the knife many days, weeks, months after Kohberger's arrest, And that's something that perhaps they'll present at trial. So that's one thing to consider, first of all. The second thing is that I have driven those routes any number of times, the alleged route Kohberger took home from the crime scene, and it's all rural farmland. It is, as far as the eye can see, windmills and brush and grain and, everything that you see in very picturesque photos. That is what it looks like up there. It is extremely rural. And if anyone thinks they can find, a knife in a haystack, they're welcome to try and bring out the community to do so. But, the belief that has existed for a long time is that the day after the homicides, they were able to trace Kohberger's cell phone and also have video footage of him going to the Albertsons grocery store up there. And he had kind of driven around some parking lots in the area and spent several hours up north, up in the Lewiston area. So there's long been beliefs that if he was the perpetrator, and I do emphasize if, and he still had the weapon that they believe was used to kill the 4 victims, that perhaps he took it up there with him and it disappeared.
Yeah. Along a river, right? Wasn't that the idea too, is that there's a river in that area?
There's 2 rivers. So there's a confluence right up there. And I don't know that people throw things in there, but it doesn't take a great leap, allegedly to have done such a thing.
In all my murder experience, that's what I would do is throw it in the river rather than throw it along the highway. But, everybody has their own style, I suppose. But to your point that I thought was the best point is that Vicky K, first of all, says from Moscow to Pullman, Lewiston, Idaho, good luck finding it. Exactly the point you're making. But the best point I think you make is this is assuming it's missing. I mean, this is one of the problems with this case is that a lot of assumptions are being made on very little information, and we don't know what the police actually have. Yes, some of that has been leaked, but we can't assume that what has been leaked is everything, so there still could be valuable information we don't know about.
Let me actually make one other point, and some really thoughtful people who watched the hearing. I'm trying to recall if it was last month or it could have been in April. I believe it was in May, as Judge Hippler broke down at a very finite level how he wants this trial to run and the specifics that attorneys will have to follow. He noted, well, this isn't a gun case, so we don't need to worry about the prosecution bringing in a gun in terms of evidence that would draw the attention of the bailiffs or the security personnel. But what he did say is, well, what we do need to think about is a knife. And people who were paying very close attention started to think to themselves, do they have the knife? Or, I mean, it could be as simple as they're going to use it, an example of the same knife to point out what kind of weapon was used to cause such damage to these 4 individuals' bodies. It could be so much as they just have not a replica, but another one of them to point it out. But it had kind of many people wondering and scratching their heads. And you could even see Josh Hurwitz look at his fellow attorney like, what do we do about this? Is it suggesting that they have the knife? And they might. We don't know that at this point.
And by the way, just because they've discussed other evidence in filings doesn't mean that they would have to reveal this either. I mean, it could be a very conscientious effort by both the prosecution and defense that they're aware of evidence that they're not talking about because they don't want it out in the public, for various different reasons. But I guess what I'm saying too is don't read into the fact that it hasn't been discussed means it doesn't exist. Now, we could both be wrong and it could still be missing. But it's definitely a solid point to make that don't assume that it is missing just because we haven't heard about it. Do you got a few minutes? Yeah, please.
I do. But let me actually pose a question to you just based on your own career and understanding of how this all works. How would that work? Let's just follow this hypothetical trail. Let's say police found along a rural route that they believe Kohberger traveled, they allege, and they find this very knife. How would you then actually even, and it sat out in the weather for 2, 3, 4 months, went through a winter. How would you even make that admissible and even argue that this is the knife we believe it was along the route? But how would you know that somebody didn't just get sick of their old hunting knife or their marine knife and just dump it? How would you?
You wouldn't. I mean, that you make an excellent point. This isn't like there's a gun with serial numbers you could match up, right? It's not like we're talking about, oh, we can match this knife to this sheath. We know this knife is tied to this sheath. Unless there's some sort of genetic material on the knife, which I imagine that is something we would have heard about before now. But you're right, just finding some knife that happens to be the same knife that they were concerned with along this incredibly rural tract of land that is 35 plus miles area you're talking about, none of that reaches the level of foundational requirements to bring that in as evidence. So they maybe found something, and again, an excellent point. Even if these people in their community search find something, we don't know if that's going to all of a sudden make that admissible, because you're right. The defense would probably stomp their feet pretty hard, saying that is not fair to just bring a random knife into this case and try to say it has to do with this when you cannot establish that it is. So excellent point there again. Johnny Knoxville says, if they had the knife, the Dateline leaker would have mentioned it. I think that's a good point, but also assumes that the leaker gave everything to Dateline, or that the leaker knew about everything to give to Dateline. It really depends on who the leaker is. I still think this leaker is probably some kind of, not directly involved, maybe data entry type person who just got their hands on some stuff and handed it over to Dateline. But Johnny Knoxville's point is not without merit, that, hey, you would think if something as salacious as the knife were found, we would know about it or the leaker would have known about it.
Can I bring this full circle?
Please.
Just, I think this is not a pat on my own back, but you know what wasn't in the Dateline episode? The DoorDash driver.
I do know, yes. That is
so
very
I think
true.
This just proves that although I have a deep respect for the information Dateline was able to obtain, as far as we can tell, it appears to be authentic. I can't corroborate the information by any means, but I think Dateline does their homework, and I'm sure they multiple sourced it, but they didn't have everything. And I think we're probably still in store for some surprises at trial.
The other point, to your point, is we're assuming a single leaker. We're assuming a single individual. It could be one individual gave them that surveillance video, and another individual shared with them some tidbits about what the murder scene looked like. And these aren't all individuals who even have a holistic overall understanding of the case, but they just know a little bit of tidbit of information, and they've all managed to leak along the way. So yeah, it would make a lot of sense that they wouldn't know about the DoorDash delivery person, that because they're not really closely involved in the investigation, they just knew one little thing about it and happened to share that with Dateline. So really good point. All right, let's get to some of these questions here. Shy Gal, one of our moderators, thank you so much, says, Josh, do you think they will sequester the jury during deliberations? And I pose that to you if you've heard anything about sequestration. And now with all of this new stuff coming out and it bothering everyone, has that been brought up again about not even just during deliberations, but during the trial?
Judge Hippler addressed this very issue, and that was when he went into granular detail about how this trial will go, according to his rules and guidelines. And he said that it is his hope not to have to sequester jurors. He already understands that this is an extremely long trial. Jurors almost certainly will be sequestered during deliberations. So we can anticipate that. He said that if need be, based on the level of publicity, that he may during midstream decide to sequester jurors, but it is not his hope to do so.
Oh, that is, if they're going to have a hard time finding people to sit for 12 weeks on a trial and then asking them to be sequestered, that's going to be very, very difficult ask from people. Christine Cherry, watching from Facebook, I wanted to give a shout out to our Facebook viewers, asked the question, assuming this story has gone global, is the defense just stalling for a new venue? Everyone is talking about this case. Was there ever discussion of further change of venue at any point?
That actually was brought up by a legal expert who I spoke with, but the state is only so big. It is a very large state, and I don't know that people in East Idaho, of course, that's where the Daybell incidents happened, and they moved to Boise because we have the largest courtroom here in Ada County, and we have the largest jury pool, 500,000 population. Split that in half, and then start to do the math in terms of what the potential jury pool could be. But no, I have not heard anything. There's no rumblings in court records. Man, that would be quite a thing for the defense to suddenly throw out in a filing and say, well, we moved it from up north and now we want to move it east. I just don't see it. And we have not heard or seen anything like that. As a reminder, you know who's paying for this entire thing? Latah County. Latah County has to afford everything. They're paying for their prosecutors. They're paying reimbursements to the assistant attorney general who are helping the prosecution. They're paying for the public defense. They're paying for the travel of witnesses. They are paying for the whole boat. And it gets more expensive and intensive when you're moving a trial from the community where a crime happened just to Boise, 6 hours. So they're paying for all the hotel rooms and everything. So I think I just don't see the judge agreeing to move the trial again.
In fact, we talked about it last time. I think we talked that the victims, or maybe it wasn't with you, sorry if I'm wrong, but the victims' families are not covered as part of a victim compensation fund for their travel and stay. So they've actually created a GoFundMe page to help them just to be able to attend the trial, which is kind of outrageous.
Yeah, it's a difficult situation. There are dollars available for people who are the family members of victims of crime. But in our situation, when a trial is moved, the travel costs are not included in that. So what we have seen over the course of many months now is that whether it's the individual families or it's people on their behalf are creating these GoFundMes, and we've seen tens of thousands of dollars raised for those family members who wish to travel and attend the trial almost on a day-to-day basis.
Wow. And I think we had a link to that before. If we're able to find that, we will include it in the chat or wherever we can, so that if people want to contribute to that. But last couple of questions on this are kind of along the same lines, and those are, what arguments were made by Ann Taylor? One, apparently she brought up the idea that she's having trouble getting his medical records, and I again take issue with that, because it's your own client. If you're having trouble signing HIPAA documents or something, you would think that would something you'd be able to do, and probably only a requisite for the mitigation, because if you're claiming your client didn't do it, then their medical records aren't all that relevant to the guilt phase. And then Kathy brings up the fact that was it all brought up again? I know it had been mentioned once that she took on an additional death penalty case in the course of all of this. Was that mentioned at all again this time around?
I'll take the second question first and then get back to the records question. But no, her Ann Taylor picked up another death penalty case. For anybody from Idaho or who was watching nationally, it was actually a pretty crazy case. In March of 2024, a prisoner claimed that he was not feeling well and he had ingested something in order to go to the hospital. And so I think it was about 3 a.m. They did a medical transport to the local Boise hospital, where the 3 prison officials were ambushed by the prisoner's friend. And he had set this up with a contraband cell phone. All 3 of the prison officials had been shot. And I mean, it gets even crazier. Unfortunately, the alarm sounded, right? And 911 was called, and they were informed that there was somebody with a weapon at the hospital. And so Boise police show up, and the officer saw the only corrections officer who had a gun and shot him. And so we had friendly fire in the incident too. The prisoner and his friend, who was also a former prisoner, then escaped for 2 days. And now they're both charged with, I believe, 2 murders up north before they were captured in Twin Falls, Idaho. So both of them are now facing murder charges. Ann Taylor took on one of the cases, which is going to also be out of up north Idaho. But that case got kicked to 2026. So it should not, assuming the Kohberger trial happens on the current timeline, it should not affect her ability. We may see that maybe there's some deadlines and some different things like that, or maybe there's a hearing or 2 she needs to attend. So maybe she won't be there for some of the Kohberger hearing if it remains on schedule. So no, that was not brought up, but that is an absolutely crazy case. And the fact that she ended up on these 2 high profile cases is super interesting. Yeah. And will probably stretch her thin. To get back to the first question about records, yes, today Ann Taylor addressed the fact that they are struggling to get some witnesses to speak to them. They also have struggled to get some of Kohberger's educational and medical records. And so she was just pointing out, look, we've run into challenges. We are not prepared for trial. The unfortunate part of being a defense attorney in a situation in a capital murder case is that you have to prepare both for the merit phase and then also the penalty phase at the same time, because they run directly one after the other. And so they got to be ready to go for, if there's a conviction, they basically have to be right on their toes and ready to go immediately. So it has to happen parallel in terms of preparing for trial.
Yeah, that shocked me in the Daybell case, that I think they broke for a matter of minutes. I mean, I think it was like come back an hour later and they began with the penalty phase. I'm just not used to that. I'm used to them at least giving jurors, take a breath, come back tomorrow. We're going to start this whole new phase. But they just did not waste time. It was like, all right, everybody, stay comfortable. Here we go on the next part of this whole thing. So
Idaho is a good libertarian and fiscally conservative state, I can assure you. And if there's an efficiency to be struck in this situation when the public is footing the bill, I'm sure they will find it.
Very solid points. Kevin, thank you so much, sir. This is always a pleasure. I really, really am honored that you came on to talk with us about this breaking news, and we appreciate all the hard work that you've been doing on this case. And I went through the I went through the trouble, and it wasn't less than trouble, of actually subscribing to the Idaho Statesman to make sure that I get it all worked out, by the way. I am now a full-fledged subscriber to the paper, so I can get your articles immediately and without a paywall. But it's that important to me because you do incredible coverage on this case, and I appreciate you always sharing with us your precious time.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And, we don't have to be here to plug anything per se, but of course, we're going to be covering the Kohberger case wall to wall. And if you have interest, and I got to tell you, I mean, we've broken a lot of the big stories in this case dating back to the early days. We were the first to report that police were canvassing the city of Moscow and sporting goods stores and hardware stores looking for a K-bar knife. My coworker, Angela Palermo, broke that story. We've been all about it since it started. We've really tried to deliver good news and information, solid facts, and we will continue to do that. And so I guess, I'm saying I'm not plugging it, but I am. I'm proud to be a member of the Idaho Statesman newsroom, and anyone who wants to sign up, we appreciated it, and we promise to continue to be dedicated, and we will be there every day of the trial.
Yeah, it's absolutely worth it. And you mission accomplished as far as what you guys are trying to do on this case. It really is incredible coverage. So thank you again, my friend. This is fantastic. I will be bugging you again soon, I am sure. But in the meantime, take care, and I appreciate you.
All right. Take care.
Bye-bye. All right. Yes. Thank you so much for your hard work, Kevin. He's fantastic. He's always great. And he does give me not, what is the word? He tempts me with his breaking news. He's, by the way, tomorrow morning, make sure you check out the website. Something's coming out. And I'm like, oh boy, here we go. And this was the latest one. And that is some pretty big breaking news if you're following this case closely. I think a witness like this DoorDash person is pretty important. All right. Polls ending shortly. Get your votes in. To remind you, the poll was Karen Reed, may have heard of her. Something may have happened with her case today. Rex Heuermann and Michael Colucci. And as soon as you have those results, Kaylin, please let us know. In the meantime, I do want to remind everybody to stay to the very end after we're done with these final stories, is that we have an announcement. We're going to be doing a giveaway. We reached 35,000 subscribers, which is mind-blowing to me, on Courtroom Confidential. I appreciate you all. And to show our appreciation to you, we are going to be doing a giveaway, and I'll explain the terms of that. Shortly. But in the meantime, 48% Rex Heuermann. You all shocked me. Maybe you guys didn't hear about the Karen Reed news today, or maybe you have heard about it and don't want to hear about it any further, and certainly feel like Ritter doesn't have anything to add that you haven't heard already. But Rex Heuermann, let's talk about it. Rex Heuermann was back in court. This is the ongoing hearing about the admissibility of the DNA evidence in this case. And as you know, this case is going to largely hinge upon DNA evidence, as the Bryan Kohberger case is. The Bryan Kohberger case, by the way, I do not mind putting myself out there and saying I do not feel they would have even allowed Rex Heuermann. Is harder to get details on. Appreciate that, Afton. You're saying other people are covering the Karen Reed case in a way that you feel like cannot be done here. I'm just shocked by that. Anyhow, Rex Heuermann, much like the Bryan Kohberger case, based upon DNA. And what I was going to say is that I do not feel the Bryan Kohberger case would have even been filed were it not for the DNA in that case. And the same, I think, could be argued in the Rex Heuermann case. It's the DNA is really that linchpin. There are many other circumstantial pieces of evidence, and perhaps even more circumstantial evidence, not perhaps, definitely more circumstantial evidence that we know of, I should say, in the Rex Heuermann case, because we know a lot more about this case than we do about the Bryan Kohberger circumstances. But there is a lot more evidence tying Rex Heuermann to this case. But again, the linchpin, the starting point, the clincher for investigators was his DNA. They zeroed in on him as a suspect based upon the car that he drove, some other circumstantial evidence as far as where phone calls were made and everything. Excellent police work once the scandal had been over with. But once they were able to zero in on him, they needed to clinch that, and they did that through DNA. So the idea of the DNA being called into question is kind of the same playbook being followed in the Bryan Kohberger case. In New York, it's a little bit different because, and I shouldn't take a moment to acknowledge the victims in this case before we move forward. And that is Maureen Brainerd Barnes, Megan Waterman, Melissa Bartholomew, Amber Lynn Costello, Sandra Castilla, Jessica Taylor, and Valerie Mack. All beautiful young women who lost their lives in a way that we now believe to be very brutal. So the New York has it's not that it's handled all that different, but there is, it's different from other cases you may have been watching closely. You've heard a lot about kind of the admissibility of expert testimony in a case like the Karen Reed case. Well, New York handles it a little bit differently in that they have this hearing, a Fry hearing, which is based upon a large inquiry into the admissibility of the expert testimony, is whether or not that type of evidence has ever been testified to in New York. Okay, so they place a lot of discretion in the judge's hands on whether or not that type of testimony or that type of expert has been used within the state of New York before. And if it has not, then it kind of falls under scrutiny. This evidence being presented in this case, this use of mitochondrial DNA, has not been used in New York before in a criminal case. That does not mean it has not been used throughout the United States in other cases. In fact, it has been used, and for quite some period of time, and it has been seen as scientifically reliable. But in New York, not so much. So this being a case of, arguably first impression, they're kind of putting it through the paces as to whether or not this DNA evidence can be used. And again, following the playbook of Bryan Kohberger, they are going to do their level best, the defense team, to try to legally keep that DNA out, because otherwise all they're left with is some sort of innocent explanation as to why their client's DNA ended up on the crime scene. And where this DNA was recovered from was from the bodies of some of these victims, from some of the bindings and I don't know if you want to call it bags or burlap that was used to bind them before their bodies were just dumped and disposed of. And also DNA from family members of Rex Heuermann. His wife and daughter were found as part of the recovery of some of these victims. So unless you've got an innocent explanation for all of that, if you're the defense, you've got to keep that out legally. So that's what they're doing here, is trying to challenge it legally. And there have been going on and on about these hearings. Well, today, a gentleman by the name of Nathaniel Adams testified. He's a biotechnology. He's right out of central casting for a biotechnology expert, in my view. He's a 27-year-old grad student, and he works for a company called Forensic Bioinformatics. I love that name. That sounds like, the name an AI engine would dump out if you asked it to give me a good name for a biotechnology company. Anyhow, the program used in this case was a program called IDBGEM. And his testimony today was that program was prone to misreading genotype data. Okay, so now they're saying we're going to attack the analysis of this DNA. You've got DNA. The playbook is you attack the recovery of that DNA. In other words, did they collect it properly? You attack the testing of that DNA, which is being done here, and you attack the maintenance and access to that DNA. Did someone else have access to that DNA? So they're saying, hey, the testing of this is flawed, that program had to be updated multiple times since making this alleged match to Rex Heuermann. 65, in fact, small updates. His testimony was, quote unquote, it's unreliable, and the software has been updated multiple times since the DNA in this case has been tested. Now, the prosecution went after him kind of based upon his expertise. Wait a minute, sir, aren't you in fact a grad student? Do you in fact know what you're talking about? All of that kind of stuff. I think at the end of the day, though, what this will come down to is for the judge, what we hear many times, which is the issue of the weight versus the admissibility. I think the judge will say, listen, this is admissible. They've reached the threshold of this evidence being admissible, but it's up to the jurors what weight they will give this evidence, and it's up to them and you, the defense, to call in to question the weight of this evidence. But everything that you're telling me, as far as the program needing updates and prone to glitches or whatever you want to call it, does not amount to enough to say that it's inadmissible and therefore I'm keeping it out. It amounts to it's enough for you to dig into that on cross-examination and have at it. You want to say that the program's got problems, you want to argue to the jury they shouldn't rely upon it, fine, but it meets the threshold of admissibility in my view. So I think that's what's probably going to happen on the Rex Heuermann case. There is no decision being made. This has now been several days that this hearing is going on. And in my view, the most important hearing in this whole case. This whole case, quite frankly, could be won or lost depending on what the judge makes a decision on right here and right now. If we go into the Rex Heuermann trial with this DNA being used by the prosecution, then they have an incredibly solid case. Without that, maybe a case they can still proceed on, but certainly not nearly as strong as what they have right now. All right. Thank you, everybody, for being here tonight. I appreciate you all. Let's get into some announcements, and then I'm going to let you go. As promised, we have a giveaway that we're going to do, but here's some things. If you missed it on Monday, we did a special live. We're doing lives now on Mondays to kind of fill in the time until we come back with more of our conversation series, and including a special case notes episode that we plan on doing on the Rex Heuermann case. So that's still in the works, and look forward to that. But we had Anjanette Levy on, and we talked about Bryan Kohberger last Monday that a lot of you enjoyed. If you missed it, please check it out. That's up on the channel now. All this week, I was going to say we were on verdict watch for Karen Reed, but in case you didn't hear, they got a verdict today, and she was only convicted of operating under the influence, which is pretty incredible an outcome for her and her team. She was looking at, by the way, she was looking at life for murder, 5 to 20 years for manslaughter, 10 years for leaving the scene, and end of the day, she got 1 year probation for operating under the influence. So that was the verdict in her case. So we're not watching that one anymore. We're not on verdict watch anymore, and we've switched pivoted with incredible efficiency to the Kohberger case. So we had our first coverage of the Kohberger hearing today, and we will be covering that case and all of its hearings live. And we're trying to see if there might be another trial in the interim. But right now, if you want to be watching Kohberger stuff, we're going to start to cover it live on the Courtroom Confidential live trials. Saturday, we're going to have our weekly roundup, as we always do, premiering at 6 a.m. Pacific, 9 a.m. Eastern. Sunday, it's Sunday Fun Day again. You got to leave us a message. You leave us a message go to thecourtroomconfidential.com. Leave us a true crime related question. I will answer it live on Sunday. It has become my favorite day of the week, and the same for a lot of you. We got yelled at for not having a Sunday Fun Day a week or so ago. We will not make that mistake again. So this Sunday, live at 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern, please check it out. And then finally, Monday, we are going to have another live. We're still working on a guest. That'll be at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. Here are the new members. A lot of them. Let me read the members, and then I'll tell you about the giveaway. Helen Lewis, Scottsdale Nana, Susan Serenznik, Paige M, Trina, Sarah Grubbs, Mickey Parks, Rosie Snarky, Rhubarb, Mary Patterson, Courtney H, Adam Batchel, Alexandra 85, Royal Ice, Karen Dietrich, Rowena Rains, Chris Douglas, Laura Jones, and Shara Andrade. Also, the other Jules, Jody Vukmir, Joe Ellie, True Crime Addicted, Noreen Wheels, Becky, Michael Don, Dabe 02, Tracy H, Copper Horse, Helena Handbasket, Helena Handbasket. Get it? Jonathan Clark, Sandra, Gina Marie, Sandy Theed, Little Miss Red Velvet OG, Blessed in Texas. Hello, it's Brit. And then Rachel Woodward, Tina, Not That Mickey, Angela Robbins, Kel, Trina, Interior Family True Crime, Stephanie Sprague, USMC Mom 2016, Dennis Wyden, Southern Charmed, Larissa Harris, Shauna, Patty L, Samantha, and Mitch Woodside. That's an incredible group of people. Thank you guys all so much for your support. So if you want to know where to become a member, go to thecourtroomconfidential.com, but you're also going to want to go to thecourtroomconfidential.com, because if you leave us a message this week, and for those who've already left us a message, you're already entered. But if you leave us a message and ask us a question, you are entered to win our 35,000 subscriber giveaway. And we're going to be picking one person at random and sending you a new Courtroom Confidential t-shirt of your choosing. Very similar to the one that I'm wearing this evening. What is this one called, Tiffany? Is this Chalky Mint, Mint Surprise, Mint Julep? It's one of my favorite colors. I like the greens that we have. This shirt, or any shirt of the colors that we offer in any size that you want anywhere in the world. Kaylin says it's Chalky Mint, but Johnny Knoxville says it's Seafoam. Wait a minute. Here we go. So which one is it? All right. I'm going to go with Kaylin. She says it's Chalky Mint. We have some disagreement. Whichever one it is that you want. Oh, Tisu says it's Seafoam. Look at that. The look on Kaylin's face right now is absolute shock. I'm wrong. It's Seafoam. Okay. Well, I'm glad that we got that all clear. At least we do solve some mysteries here on this channel. But leave us a message. Johnny, I expect a message from you, and everybody else. Leave us a message. Ask a question. If you've already left us one, don't worry about it. You're already entered, but we will enter you in a random choosing wherever you are in the world, by the way, and we will send you a t-shirt of the color and size of your choosing. So this Sunday Fun Day, please check it out to see if you won. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. Thank you so much, Kevin Fixler, for making this a wonderful evening again. Thank you to our mods, Afton and Sonia and Kathy. And thank you to everybody, Kaylin and Tiffany in the background, making this all run, and all of you for being here. This was fantastic. Thank you for joining us on a Wednesday, and I will see you guys again this Saturday and Sunday for Sunday Fun Day. Take care, everybody.